the decrease of Muslim has been the fastest in terms of the growth. For example, the Muslim growth rate in terms of percentage, Hindus were 80.5% and they came down marginally by 0.7% to 79.8%, while the Muslims increased only by 0.8%. So from 13.4 million, they came to 14.2 million. And if we
you
look
mean
at
percentage? You mean percentage, not million?
Percentage points.
Yes.
And if you look at the last 2 decades, the census shows that it is, as I said earlier, the highest decrease is amongst Muslims, not only compared to Hindus, but compared to Christians, Sikhs, Jains, etc.
Hum do, Hamara do, with the famous family planning symbol of a couple with 2 children on either side of them. In 7 states, including Gujarat, Maharashtra, and the southern states of Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh, the government actually offers incentives for those who have 2 children and imposes disincentives for those that have more than 3 children.
Yes, the southern states have reached replacement level, but even within those states, there are pockets where population growth is high. Half of India's population is young, and 30% is at a reproductive age. Women first have the burden of having children they want or do not wish to have. The unwanted fertility in India is 10%. We need to look at the socio-economic implications of the fertility decline in India, which many of us and most of us who work in this field or who look at data are welcoming.
Nothing but the truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa of India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with key issues of concern and bring you perspectives and clarity as to why these matter to you without holding back on the truth. India, with its 1.45 billion people, has the dubious distinction of currently being the country with the world's largest population. In 2022, in fact, we overtook China's population of 1.41 billion. Rather than reducing our population, in a surprising development, the RSS chief, Mohan Bhagwat, at a recent speech, which was widely circulated, called for India to be increasing our population. He wanted the 2-child policy that is prevalent across India scrapped, and instead he advocated that Indian families should aspire to have 3 children each, from 2 to 3 children. So in this episode of Nothing But the Truth, we will discuss the implications of the RSS chief's statements and analyze whether India needs to grow its population further, as he has advised, or whether this is a retrograde step. To help us do this, we will soon be joined by one of the country's top population experts, Poonam Mutreja, who is currently Executive Director of the Population Fund of India. But before that, just a bit of background about India's population policy. To recall, starting from the independence with India's population exploding, after that, both the center and the government had been advocating population control as a state policy for over 50 years now. And this was essentially to bring the numbers down. They brought in what was called the 2-child norm for each family. As a result, there are a lot of us in the 40s and 50s and the 60s have grown up with the slogan, Hum do, Hamara do, with the famous family planning symbol of a couple with 2 children on either side of them. In 7 states, including Gujarat, Maharashtra, and the southern states of Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh, the government actually offers incentives for those who have 2 children and imposes disincentives for those that have more than 3 children. As a result of all these efforts, India's population growth has considerably slowed down in the past 3 decades. In fact, in all the southern states, what is called the total fertility rate, or TFR, has dropped below 2.1. The TFR is the total number of children born to each woman. It is also known as the replacement rate, and when the overall rate across India averages 2, the population of the country will stop growing and begin to decline. But now that consensus that had been achieved in the last 50 years of keeping India's population growth under check seems to be breaking down. And as I had mentioned earlier, the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat, addressing a gathering in Nagpur, the headquarters of the RSS, expressed deep concern over India's declining fertility rates, saying that if the overall population of our country falls below the TFR of 2.1, then this society will perish on its own. So he says to maintain societal stability, Indian families should have a minimum of 3 children. The RSF chief then went on to emphasize the importance of the family as a fundamental unit of society and is quoted to have said, and I'm quoting him, "The culture and values are inherited and passed from one generation to another, thus preserving the core systems and values that are timeless and relevant not just to Indians but also globally." Now, with the RSS being the mentor of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party or the BJP, anything its chief says is taken very seriously by the entire Sangh Parivar. And as we know, the BJP is not only ruling at the center, but also in 12 states of the 28 states that's there in the country, and is part of the ruling coalition in 4 other states. Earlier, not just the RSS chief, 2 chief ministers of the southern states, Chandrababu Naidu of Andhra Pradesh and M.K. Stalin of Tamil Nadu, also advocated breaking the 2-child norm and increasing it, though for vastly different reasons that we can go into. But to analyze these implications, it's a very good time to get in Poonam Mutreja, Executive Director, Population Fund of India. Thanks, Poonam, for being on Nothing But the Truth.
Pleasure.
Poonam, let's first begin by getting your reaction to the RSS chief's statement and its implications, especially the move towards a 3-child norm. You and I have grown up with the, the entire policy of having only 2 children. That seems to be changing. And what is the impact of that?
So I am very surprised because until 2 years ago, there were statements by the same individual worrying about India's population growth, and especially the difference of growth between different communities. And 2 years later, when India's population, the world is recognizing, is stabilizing, and the demographic data, which is the best you can find data in India, is the demographic data through census and other ways, shows India's steadily declining its population. And so it surprises me, the worry about Indians having more children, because India's culture, India's growth, we have to worry about India's socio-economic growth. Why are we worried about a steady demographic decline where India has many years where we will not be reaching a replacement level in many parts of the country? Yes, the southern states have reached replacement level, but even within those states, there are pockets where population growth is high. Secondly, I'm surprised because India has a very large young population, and each of us knows that. Half of India's population is young, and 30% is at a reproductive age. So even if we have 1 or 2 children per couple or per individual, we are going to continue to grow, unlike China and many of the countries. India, this kind of panic is, I believe, not supported by data, nor is it supported by the international experts, who are demographic and population experts. He is quoting. No one, whether it's in the Lancet or UN reports, has suggested India needs to worry. In fact, when India crossed China, people were worried that India's population, there is a boom in India's population and there's an explosion, and we are going to impact climate change. So, in all this, his statement and thinking can create a lot of confusion, and it has confused me why this statement is being made, unless it is related to only to the delimitation exercise, which is worrying the 3 chief ministers you mentioned.
Well, we can get into that a little later, but I think one of the issues that has been raised by the Sangh Parivar in the past has been the fact that the Muslim population is growing faster than the Indian population, and at that some time, they would start going beyond the current 13-14% of the population that they have and start moving closer and closer to the Hindu population. And that was one of the areas of concern that had been raised. Now,
Right.
Mr. Bhagwat didn't mention that in this current speech, but clearly earlier also he talked
Yes.
of, in a very indirect way, said the two communities should grow at somewhat the same rate. That's what he sort of said. One community shouldn't be growing faster than the other. So let's examine that particular fact and what do statistics show of the Muslim rate of population growth in TFR versus the Hindu rate of population growth in TFR, and where is the, has it increased dramatically, or is it we are seeing some things that has not been talked about very clearly in the past?
Right. So the data for the last two census shows, which hasn't been factored in by his statements or much of India's analysis, which is that Muslim population growth is, in terms of numbers, higher than Hindus percentage. But the last 2 decades, the decrease of Muslim has been the fastest in terms of the growth. For example, the Muslim growth rate in terms of percentage, Hindus were 80.5%, and they came down marginally by 0.7% to 79.8%, while the Muslims increased only by 0.8%. So from 13.4 million, they came to 14.2 million. And if we
you
look
mean
at
percentage, you mean percentage, not million.
Percentage points.
Yes.
And if you look at the last 2 decades, the census shows that it is, as I said earlier, the highest decrease is amongst Muslims, not only compared to Hindus, but compared to Christians, Sikhs, Jains, etc. So Muslim population growth rates is something we don't need to worry about, because not only will they never overtake us, but projections show that they will not go beyond 18%. And if you look at the Hindu growth rate in North, it's much higher than the Muslim growth rate. In Kerala, in many other states too. It's a small state, but one of the states which has a very high Muslim growth rate is growing at 1.4. They've come down to 1.4. So it's not a Muslim Hindu issue. Hindu women in UP, Bihar, and many other states have much higher growth rates than Muslim growth rates in many parts of India.
Well, just to put that...
So that is misguided too.
Right.
It is not recognizing the fact that if we, given when the demographic trends show a downward trend, it continues. It doesn't suddenly get affected. So if we haven't had census for the last 14 years, we will find in the next census, and I'm sure there is enough people who can figure that out, that the Muslim growth rate is going to be phenomenally low in the census when the next census happens.
Well, that's interesting information that you're providing, that you are essentially saying that the Muslim growth rate, if you compare the two, there's been a steep decline in the Muslim growth birth rate as well, or the total fertility rate as compared to the Hindus. And if you take, to translate if you take the increase in population of the Muslims is 0.8% during this particular period, the decrease in the Hindu population is about 0.9%. So we might have moved from 80% to about 79%. The Muslims have increased from about 13.2 to about 14%. You're saying that at the end of, even after about 50, 60 years or 100 years, these will start to actually, the Muslim population might go up to about 18% as a total of the population, and the Hindus would remain around 75 to 80%.
Yeah, and 18 also, you see, once population starts declining, the decline can be faster than anticipated too. And you see population growth rate or fertility rates are governed by education,
Right.
socioeconomic conditions, the access women have to family planning. For instance, India never had many a basket of choice of temporary methods. We focused primarily on sterilization, which was a bit of an issue with Muslim women and them getting permission to do sterilization, which is a permanent method. With the increase in temporary methods in India, and if we see Indonesia and Bangladesh, the minute you invest in a basket of choice where there are more temporary, long lasting contraceptive methods, fertility goes down. And both Bangladesh and Indonesia are Muslim countries. And we expect in India, with the introduction of new modern methods, Muslim fertility rates will go further down.
Right, and if, just to quote some figures which were more recent in terms of, I think it was either National Family Welfare Census that was done.
NFHS data.
Yes, the NFHS, where they say that the TFR of among Muslim women decreased from 4.4 children per woman in 1992-93 to 2.3 in 2019-21, and during the same period, the TFR for Hindu women declined from 3.3 to 1.94. So you're seeing significant declines from both these communities that's there, and you're saying if you take the experience of Bangladesh, Indonesia, where they have come up with a choice of contraceptives, the population actually declines that is there. And one of the reasons, Poonam, that we are advocating, there is a very young generation, and what is the reason that India wanted to drop its population? Let's examine the 2 or 3 factors that were there. We know very clearly that in terms of poverty, we had vast amounts of poverty, 70%, and we kept adding we would never catch up in the race to feed them and provide them with jobs. That's a big issue. And of course, if we still look at our per capita income, it is 1.86 lakh per annum. And we are something like, out of 200 countries, we might be somewhere around 120 in the ranking. So in both these factors, are there any factors you see so that we can explain why is it important for a nation like India with a size of 1.46 billion people, why should we reduce our population and not increase it?
So one, people, given the poverty and given along with that the price rise, especially food basket, whatever your inflation rates are, but if you look at just for the food basket, the indices are very different and very high. People can't afford to feed even 2 children, leave alone 4 children. Second, women in India, 60%, above 60% are anemic. And women, the maternal mortality burden, the maternal morbidity burden, which we haven't mentioned, the second we haven't measured, is very high in India. And women, third, today women aspire, the aspiration of women have changed, especially the young girls. They want to get educated, they want to marry later, as well as families. Families today want to educate the fewer. One reason they have fewer children is they want to educate them. They want a better future for them. Right. So people are marrying their children late, they're educating them. And we have to meet and accept the aspirations of the people. The aspiration also of women to be in the workforce participation, the workforce, be working, and workforce participation rates for women are, as you know, still very low in India.
Absolutely.
And more than 85% of the women are in the non-formal sector. And these are not decent jobs. Often they're not paid jobs. We are counting women who do agriculture, labor in the family's farms or agricultural land. That's not counted. There is no investment in their health either, nutrition. The money does not come to the women. So we need decent jobs. Women aspire for decent jobs. And no country has been able to prosper economically and become an advanced country without women participating in the workforce.
That's a very good point. Yes, especially if we are aspiring to be a developed country by, or Viksit Bharat by 2047. Women's participation in labor, which is, has gone up post-COVID, but still far below the Chinese average and the US average, which is about 50%, and we, I think, around 37%. That percentage you're saying needs to increase. And the moment we have to also think about the women's choice, right? That's
exactly.
I mean, you can talk about that. You are also a gender this thing. So I mean, the fact is that you cannot determine how many children. Anybody can't say you should have only, you should have 5 children, right? That's a choice that you and I make as parents, that you do. And when it comes to the women, it's an added burden because, as you mentioned, maternity and maternity leaves, taking care of the children, that burden seems to continue to fall on women in India. So
absolutely.
So let's talk about that, the gender issue,
Yeah.
in terms of the fact that the entire burden then falls on the women, and we also, as you said, decrease the women entering the labor force and their independence and career opportunities that could be there for them.
So what happens is that women first have the burden of having children they want or do not wish to have.
Right.
I mean, the unwanted fertility in India is 10%, which means that 22 million women either don't have access to family planning to have fewer children that they desire, or don't have the agency to practice family planning without the family being involved or allowing them to do so. So in such a situation, women have also the burden of multiple abortions. You know how many abortions are there in India every year? The last data is from a study done by International Institute for Population Studies and the Guttmacher Institute. This was in 2015. The figure was 16.4 million abortions a year. And Raj, these are not abortions because people are having irresponsible teenage pregnancies.
Right.
Primarily, it is a proxy for contraception because 77% of the women who go through sterilization have never experienced a temporary method in their lifetime.
Right.
So what have they been doing? Either they're having more children than they wish, and you will agree, and everybody will agree, no child should be an unwanted child. In fact, an unwanted child has a 50% higher chance of mortality, morbidity, and malnutrition, etc.
Right.
Third, the women today, as I said, their aspirations have changed because, they're exposed, thanks to people like you and the media. Women are today, even in the villages, are exposed to how the better half lives, if I may say so, or the other half lives.
Better
so
third.
Their aspirations have changed.
Yes, better third, because I don't think half of the population, but better third live. Yes, go ahead. Yes, the aspirations you're mentioning. Yes.
It's the aspirational women, girls who have greater aspirations today that if we don't recognize and smell the coffee, it's not socio-economically we won't benefit, but there will be total non-acceptance of an increase, leave alone increase. They do not wish to have, many of them wish to have no children or one child, which is why probably Mr. Bhagwat is worried. But it's a trend you cannot change.
Right. And
nowhere in the world.
Yes, as we used to say that development is the best contraceptive. When you and I were much younger, and
Mrs. Gandhi said that in the UN.
Yes, that the fact that we all have money does not mean that we would want actually more children. We actually would like to have 2 or 3 children at best and take care of these 2 far better. And many now are opting for 1 child, and many are for no children because they would like to pursue their careers or their development on their own.
But then
yes,
we want the women to be sitting at home, you see. The fewer children women have, the more opportunities they can have in the workplace.
Right.
Another point, while we're discussing gender, let's look at the fact that not only the burden of family planning, but having the children, but also taking care of the children, household work. When are men, we have to change our social norms.
Right.
When are men going to start participating in child rearing? So the problem is that Indian women are so burdened at every level. And
Right.
we really need to invest if we want women to be able to have a family life balance, have children, work, even if they're not working. Women need childcare, women need care for the elderly, and India's care economy needs to grow, and that will also create jobs. So
Correct.
Indian women take too much burden, and any civilized society has to ensure that women don't have the kind of burden our women have. And secondly, if you look at Sweden and Norway, because they provided child support, they provided leave, parental leave, and child leave for both men and women, which is mother and the father. You see population there, unlike other countries in Europe, you have a stable population.
Right.
And India has all the potential to do that
Right.
for even post 2100,
Right.
which is the end of the century.
The other issue that has come up, and that's what, the other reason probably Mr. Mohan Bhagwat had talked about it, was the fact that in the southern states, the TFR or total fertility rate has dropped below the replacement levels. It is in fact around 1.7 to 1.8
Yeah.
in these 5 southern states. I'm not, if you want to add Puducherry also, you can add that. So their real problem is two things. One, there is a delimitation process that is due, was due next year, 2026, and that will determine in many senses the total number of seats that one would have in the Lok Sabha, because that is a population-based kind of exercise that's there. And the southern states are saying we should not be punished, and therefore our leverage at the center be reduced, because we did a good job about reducing population. And the northern states, some of them that are there, which have a very high fertility rate, probably 3 and above, they will gain in the number of seats there, and therefore the balance of power would shift. That's one argument that is there. And the second argument that the southern states put forward to is that if financial allocations are being made by the center, those with larger populations tend to get more, though they are actually defaulting on a lot of the development issues that the southern states did well, and therefore their population started declining, and again that would be a disincentive. So we have this stunning reversal that is happening in the south, where both Chandrababu Naidu and N.K. Stalin have spoken about stopping the two-child norm, cutting out the disincentives that were being given to families having about 3 children, and actually going for more this thing. Now, how does one answer that problem? There is a genuine problem where states, there's been unequal growth, and now these states that have done better are saying, look, we need to produce more children.
You know, the state should not be punished. First, I'd like to say that I have total sympathy for the statements made, but not for the solutions suggested by the southern chief ministers. Doing away with the two-child norm was a good thing because it was unfair, it was not democratic, it penalized the poorest women. And why only for panchayats? A two-child norm for panchayats. The fact that they didn't do it for legislative assembly and parliament tells us that the focus was on the poor having fewer opportunities, without perhaps planning to, realizing. Second, it was a huge disadvantage to women because women were divorced. There's a study by a retired IAS officer from the Madhya Pradesh cadre, which shows after the two-child norm was brought in, men divorced women on paper, children were given away for adoption.
Gosh.
And it impacted the poorest women the most. And many of us opposed it. And many states, including northern states, did away with it. Right. I was surprised that the southern states continued with the two-child norm. But the reason that population declined is not because they did a two-child norm. It never works. It's only adverse reaction. But the reason they had a fertility decline is because they invested very early in education, health, and better governance, right, as well as opportunities for women. So they should be proud of that, and we as a country should be proud of that, and we should not penalize them. And the Finance Commission, as you mentioned,
Right.
gives weightage, higher weightage to population numbers. We have to stop counting the numbers and count on the people. We have to count on the southern states, which have done well. Financial weightage should be given to better governance, investing in women, empowering women. We keep talking about Nari Shakti and women first and all of that. This is a very good example where we put our money behind our words. And second, population numbers don't have to be the deciding factor also for constituencies. You look at America, you look at many other countries, they have dealt with it more rationally, and we can review. What we need to do is, instead of knee-jerk responses, we need to think, look at the socio-economic implications of the fertility decline in India, which many of us and most of us who work in this field or who look at data are welcoming. So let's have a dialogue, let's have a debate, let's review this properly. And the delimitation is the elephant in the room.
Right.
And instead of dealing with a delimitation process where the southern states do not go at a disadvantage or are not discriminated against, we are coming out with things like have 3 children, or the southern states saying they will have penalizing for people who have 2 or less children. You know, this doesn't work anywhere in the world. Disincentives have not worked anywhere in the world. And let me tell you, India is a signatory to the Conference on Population Development Plan of Action in 1984 in Cairo, where we have signed that we will not have any disincentives or incentives. And we have done the opposite. Third thing I want to say is, these states that have invested in family planning or women's empowerment, education, etc., the northern states can learn from there. In fact, finally, I want to say, what is the problem? There is so much joblessness in India. Unemployment rates are very high. You have unemployed, starving youths or people, migrants from Bihar going to Kerala today, which is a good thing. Let's improve the environment within which migration happens. We are one country. We're talking about one election, one nation. We are one nation. Why don't we think of better migration policies, just like the world is looking at immigration policies? Who is going to, I believe, countries like Russia, Korea, Europe and America are already benefiting from the smart, educated, or skilled Indians at every level. India, if capital can fly, Raj, across borders, why can't human capital? And India's soft power does come to an extent, let's say in the US, from the positions Indians have, 7 of the top corporations headed by Indians. I think we should look at a more positive global, and we want to be the global leaders. There is so much opportunity here.
I think, there are some issues that Mr. Bhagwat had raised, which was, at a certain point, once you start dropping below a particular population level or population rate, TFR, then you could also, as he talked of, the society itself begins to go on into a decline. We've also seen in the West the fact that a lot of the people, as you get older and if you don't have younger children, you start relying on others to come into the country to do their jobs. So there are issues, but like you rightly pointed out, in India, that situation is not reached. You could have a lot of migratory labor coming from other states that are still have high TFRs and moving to lower ones. Therefore, that will take care of the unemployment issue that is there. Of course, there are, serious concerns on other fronts as well, as you had mentioned.
Aging,
and, the fact that you would, by the way, I think all indications are that India will stop having the kind of youth advantage that they had by 2050. where we've already China has begun to lose that advantage. We will do that, but hopefully by then we would get into our development parameters. But yes, I think what we have done, Poonam, and thank you so much for these insights that you've given, is that we've set the debate. There are 3 or 4 big issues that are there. There are, answers, and there will be the other side that will have their things, but clearly one is the issue of communities, Hindus versus Muslims, who's growing more, what's the actual truth. That's one of the big issues that has been driving this debate. The second is the South versus the North debate, where the southern states are doing better and therefore are being penalized for it. The third is, as you rightly pointed out, the gender issue, where women will face the burden of any change of policies of these kind and an imposition, when actually women need to bloom and come out from what they've been pushed back for decades. And the emancipation or the empowerment of women, if you'd like to put it that way, is certainly on the rise, and we should not halt that process by making them stay at home and say this is your job and not the men's job to do so.
In fact, it's an opportunity for a gender dividend, not just a demographic
Excellent point. A gender dividend that's there. And so we will leave it at that, Poonam. Thank you so much for your insights.
I enjoyed this. This was great. And we need more debates and analysis on this very critical issue.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being with me on Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing But the Truth.